My mother laughed in front of the entire wedding hall and said, "She's like a clearance item, damaged and unwanted." The guests erupted in cruel laughter, their eyes piercing me like knives. My brother smirked beside his glittering bride, who had already called me a pathetic single mom minutes earlier. I could feel my hands shaking, my throat tightening, my son's small fingers clutching mine under the table. Shame burned hotter than fire in my chest, but silence was all I had left. Or at least that's what they thought, until my 9-year-old son stood up and reached for the microphone. When I was 10 years old, I learned that grief doesn't just break you, it reshapes you. My father died suddenly in a car accident, and my mother remarried less than a year later. She told me she needed stability, someone who could provide for the family. But what she really meant was that I would need to grow up fast, and that my half-brother Ethan would inherit all the softness and attention she no longer had for me. By the time I was 16, I had an acceptance letter to Columbia University waiting on my desk. It was my dream, a scholarship, a way out, a chance to carve a future where I wasn't the forgotten child in my own home. But Ethan had just turned 11, and the private academy he wanted to attend was beyond my stepfather's means. I remember overhearing their whispered argument. "We can't afford it," he said. My mother's answer cut through me like glass. "Rachel can defer, she's strong enough. Ethan deserves better." So I deferred. Then I canceled. I picked up 2 jobs, tutoring and waiting tables, and every cent went to Ethan's tuition. When people congratulated my mother on raising such a gifted son, she would smile and nod, never mentioning who had been the invisible scaffolding holding him up. Years passed that way. Every sacrifice carved a deeper hollow in me, but I convinced myself it was worth it. Ethan would have what I never did: ease, opportunity, a life untouched by compromise. When my own chance at love appeared, a boy I adored during my senior year of high school, I let him slip away. How could I plan a future with someone when every paycheck was already spoken for, every dream redirected to my brother's advantage? Now I'm 34. My name is Rachel Monroe. I teach English at a public high school and raise my 9-year-old son, Lucas. My marriage didn't last. His father left when Lucas was still a toddler. People call me strong, resilient, selfless. I don't feel like any of those things. Most days I feel like a woman who learned to live on scraps while everyone else feasted. Still, Lucas is my anchor. When the world feels too heavy, he has this way of pulling me back with the smallest words. One night, a week before the wedding, I sat hunched over a stack of ungraded papers, the wedding invitation tucked beneath them like a wound I couldn't stop pressing. Lucas padded in, wearing his dinosaur pajamas. "Mom," he whispered, "you're the prettiest person I've ever seen." My throat tightened, and I pulled him into my lap. For a moment, the world stilled. His tiny arms around my neck were worth more than every sacrifice I had made, and yet all my sacrifices would soon be twisted into weapons against me. Ethan Monroe, my golden brother, grew into everything I had paved the way for. At 29, he was handsome, charming, and endlessly indulged. My mother doted on him as though the sun rose only for him. He walked through life believing doors opened on their own, never realizing who had pushed them wide for him. Now he was marrying Isabella Clark, the daughter of a wealthy family that treated their fortune like armor. Isabella was flawless in the kind of way that cost money. Her smile was polished, her nails perfect, her laughter like champagne poured into crystal, but beneath the sparkle was a streak of cruelty as sharp as any blade. From the first time she met me, her eyes skimmed over my thrift store dress and settled on me the way someone inspects a stain they can't quite scrub out. "You'll help with the arrangements, won't you, Rachel?" she asked sweetly, as though it were my duty to serve. She handed me a checklist of tasks, picking up favors, addressing invitations, arranging flowers without waiting for my agreement. When I hesitated, she tilted her head. "It's the least you can do, considering everything Ethan has done for you." Everything Ethan had done for me. The words almost made me laugh. If only she knew. If only she had the faintest idea how many years of my life had been burned up to keep his path clear. But the final cut came in the form of a single sentence. "Oh, and the wedding is child-free, so Lucas won't be attending." I stared at her, my mouth dry. "He's family," I whispered. Isabella's smile never wavered. "Exactly. Which is why it would be awkward. This is a formal event, you understand?" When I turned to my mother, hoping for support, she simply shrugged. "Don't make this about you, Rachel. It's Ethan's big day. Lucas, my sweet boy, would be erased from his uncle's wedding like he didn't exist, like I didn't matter." I swallowed the protest burning in my throat because I knew how it would sound to them, bitter, jealous, ungrateful. Rachel thought the worst wound was being excluded, but she hadn't yet tasted true humiliation. The invitation arrived in a heavy white envelope, gilded with gold trim as though its very paper was worth more than my monthly paycheck. My hands trembled as I slid the card free, scanning the neat calligraphy. "Mr. and Mrs. Clark request the honor of your presence at the wedding of their daughter Isabella, to Ethan Monroe." My eyes darted instinctively toward the line where my name should have been joined by Lucas's, but his name wasn't there. Only mine, written alone, as if he did not exist. I read the card again, hoping I had missed something, but the absence was deliberate, calculated, cruel. My stomach twisted as I realized that my son, the one bright thing in my life, was unworthy in their eyes of attending. I called Ethan that night. "Why isn't Lucas included?" I asked, my voice sharp with disbelief. Ethan sighed like a man burdened with trivial complaints. "Rachel, it's a formal wedding. No children. That's normal." "Normal?" I echoed. "He's your nephew. He's family." "You're making this about you," he snapped. "Don't be selfish." Selfish. The word lodged in my chest like a shard of glass. All the years I had given him, all the dreams I had buried, and now I was selfish for wanting my son to sit by my side? When I turned to my mother for help, her face hardened. "Rachel, stop. Ethan's right. Don't ruin his moment with your demands. Be gracious." I wanted to scream, to remind them both of the sacrifices I had made, but the words withered on my tongue. I swallowed them down because that's what I had always done. Swallowed pain until it hardened into silence. A week later, I stood in a thrift store thumbing through racks of secondhand dresses. I chose a navy gown, its hem slightly frayed, the fabric soft from wear. When I tried it on at home, Lucas's eyes lit up. "You look beautiful, Mom," he whispered, his smile wide, his voice certain. He twirled me clumsily in the living room, and for a fleeting moment, I believed him. That moment warmed me, held me steady against the storm I knew was coming. But the seat they saved for me wasn't for family. It was for ridicule. The wedding was a spectacle of wealth and vanity. Chandeliers glittered overhead, casting light across crystal glasses and silk tablecloths. Guests wore gowns that shimmered like liquid gold. Laughter spilled through the air, champagne flowed like water, and every corner of the hall screamed of excess. When I arrived, heads turned, some polite, some mocking. I found my name card not at a place of honor, not even among relatives, but shoved to a table near the restroom doors. My chair wobbled on uneven legs, tucked so far in the corner it might as well have been exile. I sat, trying to steady my breathing, reminding myself I was here for Ethan, that I could endure one night of discomfort. But endurance has its limits. The ceremony ended, and the reception began. Speeches filled the air, praises for Ethan, admiration for Isabella, toasts to their future. I stayed quiet, my hands clenched in my lap, my smile frozen in place. Then Isabella's voice rose, sweet and sharp as poison. "I must say, Ethan, you've always been so generous, even with your family." She turned her gaze toward me, lips curling. "Especially your sister. She's just a pathetic single mom, isn't she?" Laughter erupted like a wildfire, devouring the room. Glasses clinked, whispers hissed, eyes burned into me with delight. I froze, every muscle locked in shame. The word pathetic echoed in my skull, loud enough to drown out the music. And then my mother joined in. Her laugh cut sharper than Isabella's cruelty. "Oh, don't be so harsh," she crooned, though her eyes glittered with malice. "She's more like a clearance item, damaged and unwanted, but still taking up space." The hall roared. Strangers, friends, colleagues, every single person seemed to lean into my humiliation, feeding on it. My chest constricted, heat rose to my face, and for the first time in years I felt utterly naked before them all. I wanted to run, to vanish, to gather Lucas into my arms and never look back. But when I turned to him, I saw something I hadn't expected. Not tears, not confusion, but a steady fire in his young eyes. His small fists were clenched, his lips pressed tight. And then my son stood up. Lucas's small frame seemed to grow tenfold as he marched toward the stage. His shoes tapped against the marble floor, each step loud enough to cut through the hum of laughter that still lingered in the air. When he reached the microphone, his little hands gripped the stand with surprising steadiness. His voice, clear and unwavering, rang out into the cavernous hall. "I know something about the bride." The words sliced the room in half. Laughter died mid-breath, champagne glasses froze halfway to mouths, and chairs creaked as bodies leaned forward, eager for the storm that had just been summoned. Isabella's flawless complexion drained of color. Her lips parted in a stiff smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What are you doing?" she hissed, though the microphone carried the tremor in her voice for all to hear. "Lucas, sit down," Ethan barked, panic threading through his usually smooth tone. He moved as though to pull the boy away, but murmurs rippled through the guests. The crowd had smelled blood, and they wanted the boy to speak. "Let him talk," someone called. "Yes, let the boy finish," another chimed in, emboldened by the thrill of scandal. A cheer rose, building like a tide against Ethan's protests. The bride's perfect night was teetering on the edge, and no one was eager to drag it back to safety. Lucas swallowed, his dark eyes steady. His voice trembled, but carried a sharpness that pierced the silence. "I know something about Isabella Clarke." The air crackled, my pulse pounded in my ears, torn between pride and terror. My son was about to step into a battlefield he didn't understand, and yet he was braver than I had ever been. But before Lucas could finish, a man's voice thundered from the back of the hall. "Enough!" The command sliced through the air like steel. All heads turned. From the shadows of the grand doorway emerged a tall figure, his presence commanding every gaze. Nathaniel Cross. His tailored suit caught the light, but it was his eyes, cold, sharp, familiar, that rooted me to my seat. I hadn't seen him in over a decade, but time had not dulled the memory. Nathaniel, the boy I once loved and lost. Nathaniel, the man I thought I would build a life with before everything shattered. Whispers rippled. "Is that Nathaniel Cross? The investor? The Clarke family's partner?" He strode forward with the confidence of someone who owned not just the room, but everyone inside it. When he reached the stage, he placed a steady hand on Lucas's shoulder, gently lowering the microphone from his grip. "This is not a burden for a child to carry," he said, his voice low but resonant. Gasps echoed, and the tide shifted in an instant. No longer was Lucas the focus of ridicule. Nathaniel had taken the weight, redirecting every eye in the room. "Mr. Cross!" Mr. Clarke himself rose from his seat, his face a mask of confusion and forced courtesy. "What are you doing here?" "I'm exactly where I need to be," Nathaniel replied coolly. He turned his gaze toward Isabella, whose body was trembling despite her rigid smile. "Because it seems this union is built on lies." The room exploded in whispers. Isabella's hand tightened around her champagne flute until I feared it would shatter. Ethan grabbed her arm, whispering furiously, but his eyes betrayed fear. Nathaniel straightened, his gaze flicking briefly to me. For a heartbeat, the room dissolved. I was 20 again, standing on a quiet street, listening to him promise me forever before my family tore us apart. But that moment vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by the cold truth. He was here now, in this room, and his arrival was no accident. "Rachel Monroe," Nathaniel announced, turning to the crowd. "She has been treated as nothing more than a stain tonight, yet she is the reason her brother stands here at all. Every opportunity he's had, every step he's taken was built on her sacrifice." A stunned hush fell over the guests. For the first time, heads turned toward me, not with mockery, but with curiosity, shame even. Ethan's face contorted, Isabella's mask cracked. My mother's lips parted in shock, her hands twitching nervously in her lap. And then came the dagger. Nathaniel's eyes, icy and relentless, locked on Isabella. "And as for the bride, let's just say she and I are not strangers." The air imploded, gasps ricocheted around the room. Isabella's glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the floor. Ethan's face blanched, rage and disbelief warring in his eyes. The whispers became a roar. They knew each other. "Was there something between them?" Isabella stammered. It's not what it looks like." But the cracks in her perfect facade had spread too far. Guests leaned forward, hungry for the truth, for scandal, for blood. My humiliation had been replaced with theirs, the spotlight yanked violently from me and cast upon the golden couple. And as I watched Nathaniel stand there, calm and calculated, I felt a shiver crawl down my spine. This wasn't coincidence. He hadn't arrived by chance, hadn't spoken on impulse. Rachel realized this was no coincidence. The shock in the room pulsed like a living thing, bouncing from guest to guest in whispers and gasps. Nathaniel's words had detonated the perfect illusion Isabella and Ethan had so carefully crafted. Yet, as I stood there, trembling in my chair, I knew there was more. So much more that the crowd did not yet see. Because Nathaniel and I had once been something. I was 19 when I met him. He was 21, ambitious, brilliant, but poor. He worked nights at a warehouse while studying finance during the day. He had a smile that could soften even my mother's sharpest glare. At least I thought it could. We dreamed together, made promises beneath starlit skies, and whispered futures where neither of us had to bow to anyone's expectations. For the first time, I believed I could have something for myself, not just for Ethan. But my mother saw him as a parasite. "He has nothing," she spat one evening when she caught us holding hands on the porch. "And if you stay with him, you'll have nothing too." Ethan, barely a teenager, parroted her words with smug disdain. "You're supposed to help me, not waste time on some broke nobody." The weight of their contempt crushed us. My mother intercepted his calls, sneered at the small gifts he brought me, mocked the worn jacket he wore. The final blow came when she told me coldly, "If you choose him, don't bother coming home." I chose Ethan. I always did. I buried Nathaniel with the rest of my dreams. But Nathaniel didn't vanish. He climbed step by relentless step into power and wealth. He built an empire, and with it, he nurtured a wound, a hunger for justice, or maybe revenge. And now, standing here in this glittering hall, he wasn't just avenging himself. He was avenging me. Yet even as the guests leaned forward, ravenous for scandal, another truth simmered beneath the surface. A truth only Lucas and I shared. A week before the wedding, I had been grading papers late at night while Lucas played in the living room. I thought he had fallen asleep on the couch, but later he slipped into my room, his eyes wide and unsettled. "Mom," he whispered, "I heard something." He told me he'd picked up the cordless phone after it rang, thinking it was for me. Instead, he heard Isabella's voice, sharp and impatient. "I can't talk long," she had said. "You know I'm marrying Ethan this week. Stop calling me." Then a man's voice replied, low and angry, "You don't get to erase me, Isabella. I'll tell him everything." Lucas clutched the blanket tighter as he repeated the words. "She said she loved him, Mom. Not Uncle Ethan. Someone else." At the time, I hushed him, told him it was probably a mistake, that he mustn't repeat it. But now, seeing Isabella pale beneath Nathaniel's piercing gaze, I realized the child had been holding the most dangerous truth of all. Lucas wasn't just defending his mother. He was holding a secret that could ruin a marriage before it began. The whispers in the hall grew louder, tumbling like stones down a cliff. They were together? How long? Did Ethan know? Ethan grabbed Isabella's arm. What the hell is he talking about? His voice cracked, the smooth charm gone. I don't know what he means, Isabella stammered, her face crumbling. She tried to laugh, but it came out strangled. Nathaniel exaggerates. Exaggerates? Ethan's eyes blazed. Did you know him? Did you? She said nothing. Silence hung heavier than any confession. My mother rose from her seat, her voice sharp, frantic. Enough! This is ridiculous! Nathaniel, you're bitter. You're trying to ruin my son's wedding because Rachel rejected you years ago. Don't you all see? This is about jealousy. The defense rang hollow. Guests glanced at one another, some frowning, others smirking. Her words only highlighted her desperation, her willingness to side with Isabella rather than me. Again, always. I sat still, my hand resting on Lucas's small fingers. He looked up at me, searching my face for fear, but I gave him only calm. My silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was strength. For the first time, I felt no need to defend myself. The truth was unspooling on its own, faster and sharper than any blade I could wield. But the storm had only begun. The fallout began before the wedding cake was even cut. By morning, the story had exploded across news sites and social media. Heiress exposed in scandalous affair. Clark Monroe, wedding collapses amid rumors. Headlines blared with words sharp enough to cut, accompanied by photos of Isabella's frozen face, Ethan's rage, Nathaniel's cold poise. The Clark family moved quickly. Their lawyers issued statements, their PR team scrambled to spin the story, but nothing could stop the tidal wave. Wealth thrives on reputation, and theirs was now poisoned. By noon, the deal they had been negotiating with Ethan's firm, a contract that would have secured his future, was dead. We cannot associate with instability, their terse email read. With that, years of networking, of being the golden child, unraveled in a single stroke. Calls that once poured in with invitations and opportunities went silent. Friends who had filled Ethan's world with adoration vanished. His phone, once buzzing with praise, was now a graveyard of missed calls he could never return. By evening, his apartment was quiet, except for the hum of unanswered voicemails. He was untouchable now, not in power, but in disgrace. Isabella fared no better. She had clung to Ethan at first, whispering promises, begging him to believe her. But when the photographs emerged, her arm hooked through Nathaniel's at a charity gala months before, her gaze unmistakably intimate, Ethan's fury erupted. "This wedding is over!" he hissed, shoving the ring box into her trembling hands. He left her sobbing on the marble floor of the reception hall, mascara streaking down her cheeks, as photographers outside snapped the perfect ruin of a bride. By the next morning, the media had their feast. The jilted groom, the disgraced bride, the family with too many skeletons to bury. And through it all, Nathaniel stood untouched, his name whispered with awe. Some called him ruthless, others brilliant, but no one doubted his influence. It was only later, when I saw the perfectly timed leak of Isabella's private messages to the press, that I understood. Nathaniel hadn't simply revealed the truth in that wedding hall, he had orchestrated its explosion. He had planted the story like a ticking bomb, waiting for the precise moment to detonate it. And for the first time, Ethan looked at his sister with fear. He came to me days later, hollow-eyed, his expensive suit wrinkled, his voice stripped of arrogance. "Rachel," he said, almost pleading, I didn't know she'd do this to me. I thought you'd be proud of me." I stared at him, the brother I had built my life around, the boy for whom I had traded dreams and love. All I saw was a man undone by his own arrogance, a man who had believed he was untouchable because others bled to keep him safe. "Proud?" My voice was steady, cold. "I gave you everything, Ethan, and you repaid me with nothing but contempt. Now you know what it feels like to be discarded." He dropped his gaze, shoulders sagging. "I'm sorry, Rachel. Please. You're all I have left." But I was not his savior anymore. Our mother fared no better. Her face became the subject of cruel jokes, her favoritism laid bare. Neighbors whispered, colleagues smirked, and even the friends she once boasted to turned away. She had placed all her bets on Ethan and Isabella, and when they collapsed, so did she. The house that once felt like the axis of my world grew silent. Ethan sat alone in his room, my mother in hers, each swallowed by shame. The family I had sacrificed myself to protect was nothing more than rubble. And yet, in the quiet of my own small apartment, there was peace. Lucas crawled into my lap one evening as the city lights blinked outside our window. He pressed his head against my chest, his voice muffled but sure. "We don't need them, Mom. We're enough." Tears blurred my vision, but they were not the same tears I had shed at the wedding. These were lighter, cleansing. I kissed his hair, breathing in the scent of childhood that still clung to him. For once, the weight of sacrifice lifted, but Rachel's silence was not forgiveness. It was her final judgment. The weeks that followed were strangely quiet. After the chaos of the wedding and its fallout, silence felt almost foreign, like stepping into a house where the storm had ripped off the roof but left the walls intact. I woke each morning without the weight of proving myself to anyone, and for the first time, I breathed without waiting for someone else's judgment. At school, my colleagues looked at me differently. Where once they saw the weary single mother, they now saw resilience carved into bone. Parents shook my hand with a newfound respect. Students whispered about how Ms. Monroe is stronger than she looks. I carried myself taller, my steps more assured, no longer shrinking into corners. The woman who once accepted scraps now demanded space at the table. Nathaniel reached out cautiously at first. A phone call, a coffee, an offer to help with Lucas's school project. I resisted, afraid that history might repeat itself, that his presence would again cost me everything. But he was different now, measured, steady, aware of his power but unwilling to wield it carelessly around me. When he looked at me, it wasn't with pity or arrogance, but with a quiet recognition. "You're not the girl I used to know," he said one evening as we walked along the river. "No," I answered softly. "I had to become someone else." His smile was tinged with sadness, but also admiration. There was no need for grand promises this time, just two people scarred by the past, daring to imagine something better. Lucas adored him. Nathaniel never treated my son as baggage, but as a person worth listening to. He'd kneel to Lucas's height, asking about dinosaurs or soccer, and Lucas's laughter would echo through the room. Watching them together, I felt a warmth I hadn't dared to hope for. Happiness not built on sacrifice, but on choice. Still, I kept my boundaries clear. My family, the one I had bled for, was no longer my compass. I visited once out of obligation. Ethan's apartment was half empty, the curtains drawn against a world that no longer applauded him. He muttered apologies I didn't acknowledge. My mother sat across from me, her hair gray, her eyes hollow. She reached for my hand, whispering, "I only wanted the best for you." I pulled my hand back gently. "No, you wanted the best for Ethan, and you chose him every time." My voice didn't shake. There was no rage, no need for it, just truth. Leaving their house, I felt lighter. I had no desire for revenge anymore, no hunger to see them grovel. What I wanted was freedom, and I had it. One afternoon, Lucas and I walked through the park. The autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves, crisp and earthy. He ran ahead, his laughter bright, then turned back to me. "Mom, you look happy." I laughed, startled by the simple truth of it. "I am, Lucas." He grinned, running back to take my hand. In that moment, I realized that my greatest transformation wasn't about strength or independence. It was about allowing myself joy. Meanwhile, Isabella's fall was merciless. The society she once dazzled turned its back on her. Invitations dried up, whispers followed her in every room, and her name became a punchline in tabloids. She disappeared from the public eye, But when glimpses of her surfaced, she looked gaunt, her shine replaced by desperation. Ethan's decline was slower, but no less brutal. Without contracts, without friends, he drifted from one failed venture to another. His arrogance had been his armor, and once stripped, he was exposed, fragile, bitter, forgotten. And my mother. She withered in silence. The woman who once commanded every room with her sharp tongue now sat alone, the weight of her favoritism crushing her spirit. She had gambled everything on Ethan's brilliance and Isabella's glamour, only to watch both crumble. Her calls came less often, her voice weaker each time. Justice had come, not with fire, but with inevitability. They lived with the wreckage of their choices, while I built something new. One evening, I tucked Lucas into bed. He smiled sleepily, his voice drowsy but certain. "We're enough, Mom." Tears pricked my eyes, but this time, they were warm. "Yes, sweetheart," I whispered, brushing his hair back. "We're more than enough." Sometimes, revenge isn't about destroying them. It's about refusing to let them destroy you. And as I closed that chapter, little did I know, life was about to open another door.